The last and the most important section in the architectural document is the components drill down section. This section describes the components that take part in the whole architecture as described in the architectural overview section. This is the longest section by far. There is no actual limit to the length of this section, and I've created documents in which this section alone was more than 100 pages. It's not that this is the recommended length. 10 pages can also be enough. It's just a function of the number of components and the level of drill down that needs to be reached. The audience of this section is a development team. If the QA lead also wants to take a look, she is welcome to do so, but it's not necessary. In some rare situations, some management folks would also like to take a look, but chances are that after a few pages they will understand they have more important things to do and will leave it. So, what are the contents of this section? Well, this section goes through the various components depicted in the architectural overview and describes them in length. For each component, there should be 4 subsections in the document. First, the role of the component in the architecture. This is basically a short recap of the description found in the architectural overview section. Second, the technology stack. This subsection should describe in detail what technologies will be used in developing the component. This subsection should first lay out the various parts in the component that their technology should be selected. For example, data store, backend, and front end. And then, for each one of them, the selected technology should be described. Now, let's be honest here. Technology stack selection is one of the most heated topics in the software world. We already discussed the problems you should expect when trying to decide on the stack that will be used in the system. For this reason, it is extremely important that the technology stack subsection will be extremely detailed, and even more important, include the rationale behind the selection. For example, when discussing the data store, if the decision is to go with NoSQL database, such as Mongo, it should be clear why this decision was made. Reasons such as expected data structure, developers' experience, performance, and ease of development are all legitimate reasons, and they must appear in this section. In addition, it's even better to explicitly compare MongoDB to other relational databases, such as SQL Server, and explain in detail what are the pros and cons of each alternative, and why the decision was made. Now, note that you don't have to go into this level of detail for every component. If you made this process for the first component and the decision is valid for the same reasons also for other components, you can refer the readers to the selection process described in the first component, and there is no need to copy-paste the same section over and over. The next subsection is a components architecture. This section describes the inner architecture of the component. It complements the architecture overview that describes the bigger picture by going into each and every component and detailing what exactly it should do and how. Remember all the architecture patterns we discussed earlier, the N-tier pattern, the dependency injection, stateless, and all the rest? This is where you are going to use it. Start with describing the API of the component if there is any. Don't be afraid of detailing the actual methods of the API. It will make the development much easier and faster. I usually include a table that describes all that is needed to know about the API, its role, URL, response codes, and comments. It proves to be a great technique when working with the developers, as they already know how the component exposes itself and sets the context for the rest of the architecture. Describe in detail the role of every layer up to the method level. This will help the developers fully understand the role of the layers and what should and shouldn't be in it. If there are important considerations that should be taken into account, mention them here. For example, if the business layer or BL should take advantage of a dependency injection mechanism in its constructor, mention it here. The bottom line here is simple. Be as detailed as possible and use as much visualizations as possible, and that will make yours and the developer's life much easier later. The last subsection is development instructions. This is usually a small subsection, no more than half page, containing bulleted list of concrete development instructions. These instructions should point out specific guidelines that are not part of the architecture but still relevant for the developers. For example, usage of specific library for specific task, or making sure the API is documented in a format that makes it usable by tools such as Swagger. It's important to keep this list short, concise, and very practical. Avoid discussing patterns and theories here. This is a do-don't list, nothing else. Again, as with all the sections discussed here, you will find a complete fully functional architecture document at the end of the next section, where we will discuss a real-world case study and build its architecture together. You will see there this section and be able to see exactly what it looks like. So, with that, we conclude the architecture document section. This document is the center of the architecture's work, although not the only thing you will do. It's extremely important. This document will include all the insights produced while working on the architecture. This will help you in the future for justifying decisions that we made earlier in the process. Always try to get into your audience mind. Write the executive summary for the management and target the components drill down to the developers. This way, the document will be what it should be, the cornerstone and foundation of the system.